All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. And good to see some familiar faces in the room. And this is our last session for the year officially. We all get a summer break, right? So those of you who I haven't met, I am Kim Stodhill, one of the co-chairs of this special interest group for IECs. I have a long convoluted story. I'm based in Alabama. We'll just start saying that because I'll be there in a month. And so that will be my new home in Birmingham. And, but I am also the parent of a graduating high school senior. So that's why May has become as busy as December for me, it feels like. And, but I'm trying to enjoy every bit of it as we go through this. And we're excited to talk to you all today about, we've got 3 different topics. We may not get to the last one, depending on how robust the conversation is on the first 2. But I'll let Deb introduce herself and then we'll get started.
Awesome. Hello, good morning, everyone. It's so nice to see you. For those of you who were at the SACAT conference, it's really nice to see you again. I'm Deb Ryan. I am in Eastern North Carolina, so I am in rural Eastern North Carolina. I was in the Cary area, so the Triangle, and the bulk of my students are still in the Triangle. I'm just really happy that SACAC has given us this space for us to connect kind of across the South, which I think is really interesting, so we can learn from each other and share experiences. My kids are older, and so we just had our final graduation. Our son's fiance just had her graduation for her MSW. And so we have one more graduation in a couple of years when our daughter gets her PhD, but I am happy to be like out of that field because it's a lot. I'm just having like Facebook memories are coming up of like, oh, these things happen. And I'm like, man, that was a lot. So anyway, so great to see you. And I just want to, we'll just go through kind of like what's going to be happening today. And I'm just going to kind of keep an eye on the participants coming in too, to make sure we can let people in. We will start at the beginning with just some space and time for people to have self-reflection for the topics on the right, but just some reminders about things and just to be respectful of each other. This is a space for people to say, speak their truth, but also be respectful of each other's truths. I think we're probably a small enough group that if you just want to talk, you can talk. But if we start to get busier, if you can raise your hand in the toolbar, that would be great. And then we can call on people. Just making sure too that we're respectful of each other's time. So being concise in your comments. And we kind of have like a 3-minute like head timer. Just that at some point we interrupt you and say, hey, could you kind of like, what is the point of the story that you're telling? Would be great. Just so we make sure that people have time to share. Everyone has time to speak. We're all talkers, as you know. If you were at the SACAT conference, it was like trying to corral like very drunk cats who'd been hit on the head with a like hammer. Like it was great. It was wonderful, but it was like, woo. And I just imagine if we'd had that session later in the day and people were drinking, that it would have been like, I don't know. Yeah, I'm too old for that now. It was wonderful, but we are all talkers. And we'll also monitor the chat. So, and then Kim, do you want to kind of get people started with like what we're trying to think about today in terms of kind of our 3 topics? So
Sure. So kind of our buckets, our 3 buckets are best practices, growing our business, and self-care. And you'll see in the topics like very more specific questions underneath each of those big headings. But we really wanted to start out with, I think we heard from several of you at the SACAT conference meeting that it was, we all like to learn from each other in terms of how we're improving our workflow and what we're doing within our practices that are, the sort of the aha moments, which I think we've probably all had at times when you're like, I could do this much easier and smarter if I do it this way, that kind of thing. So that's where we'll start with, something that you've incorporated that you really would love to share with others because you feel like it was valuable for you and it might be valuable for the rest of us to know about. So we'll fire away with that to start with. And I'm going to take some notes as well. And obviously we've got the recording going.
And what I'm actually going to do is I'll copy these questions and put them into the chat so that we can see each other. We can all sort of have the, because I like to be able to see everyone. Right. Stop share. And then let me get the questions and put them in the chat. If I can remember how to do that. I don't know if about you all, but I work, like my calls with my students are typically very late into the day. And by the last student, I can't remember how to spell. Like it's, I think they find it amusing, but they're like, Steph, what did you just type in? And I'm like, I don't even know. Who knows? Okay. So this is, okay. So anyone thought something that you've done this year that you feel like it would be helpful for other people to know about, a practice that you've incorporated that you really love? And please, I think we're small enough if you just want to unmute yourself. I have a couple.
Well, you start. That'll
Okay,
keep us
I'll
rolling.
start. This is like the smallest thing. It's so small. But I learned this in another session somewhere. I put into my contract a deadline for when my prices might change, which seems like a really tiny thing to do, but it helps, I think, families understand. So I have sort of a like, I will only keep your spot, you know, when families first reach out to me, like I say in that initial email, like I will only hold a spot for about a week. But I don't know about you all, but very often families are like, they just ghost me forever. And I'm like, whatever, like, it's fine. I don't have, my cohort's closed. But if they come back to me and they're like, oh, but that initial contract, and this, I had this happen once or twice, that initial contract was, the price was this. And I was like, well, my prices have raised and they've paid that higher price. But then somebody else in a different meeting was like, no, you need to put it in your contract. This price is effective through this date. So I just did that. And I was very pleased. I don't know why I was so pleased about it, but I was like, this is great. So anyway, I feel like it's a helpful just reminder to folks, like in my contract, when you see it, this is not the be all end all for pricing. Like it's going to go up. So
we actually put an expiration date on our contracts. Nice. So that they know, which goes hand in hand with what you're saying about the price, but just knowing they have, and usually it's like the end of the month from when we meet, depending on when that initial meeting is, because, they can come back to us and we may be full. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, it's kind of like we're holding the spot and the price, and this is when the contract expires. Doesn't mean they always read it.
Right. Families have to fill out the contract. My agreement, I call my agreement for services. They have to fill it out and send it to me before I'll schedule my first meeting with them. I just stopped doing this sort of like initial, like, oh, we'll just talk for a little while and then they can ask me all the questions. And also because I have a pretty big practice, I kept forgetting to get people, and then it was chasing them down to make them sign the contract and do everything. So I won't even meet with people until they sign the contract anymore. Yeah, we do a free 30-minute, just kind of telling them about our services, like, with the student on board. And that's when we give them the contract, but we don't have that first, like you were saying, we don't have that first meeting with the student until kind of there's money in hand. Mm-hmm. And the paperwork's all, because if they can't get the paperwork to us and they can't get the money to us, then that kind of speaks for how the relationship is going to go or not throughout. But yeah, no, I think that's great. Because, by the time you get to, you may have raised your prices.
That's true. That's a great idea.
Other folks, and it can be, again, I think little things sometimes can be very pleasing. Other things that people have done that they've been really happy about.
We are thinking about implementing something as a result of the past couple of weeks. Normally, one of my colleagues is here, Dan, so he can speak to this. But typically, you might have a student who is forgetful. It's quite another thing when a student is consistently forgetful, and even after you loop the parents in, so they're aware of this. We do a comprehensive package. So in theory, like, we're not going, if you miss a meeting, usually let it slide, but then it happens twice, it happens 3 times. So something we're going to likely be incorporating in our next contract is one that says if you miss or cancel within 24 hours, 3 meetings in a row within like 30 days, or 3 times within 30 days or something, you will be charged for that 3rd time for our hourly rate, because it's just taking up spots that other students who are more serious about this process could have had, and our time, because I know all of you are probably similar. We kind of bend over backwards to accommodate difficult student schedules with all of our extracurriculars. And then we get kind of, jilted when they do this. So it's something we kind of learn. It hasn't happened to this degree until recently, where I'm like, okay, it's going to go in the contract now.
What calendar system do you all use?
We use Calendly,
Mhm.
and this one client in particular that Sarah's referencing, just we started out strong. We had a great few first meetings, and then just no showed and canceled. We would get a cancellation notice 10 minutes before the appointment, and I'm sitting here. The last one, and this sounds so selfish, but like I was sitting on the Cape over the weekend, and I wanted to be at the beach with my family. It wasn't like swimming weather, but at least it was nice enough to be sitting in the sand. And here I am sitting in front of my computer waiting for him to show up, and then he doesn't show. And so it's just this one client in particular is what drove it for us, because the rest of ours honestly have been great, and it hasn't been an issue. But I think it's just one of those things, like you were saying, with your price changes too. Like, you got to put it in the contract because it's going to happen, and then it's there in case, and hopefully we never need to use it, but then it's there.
Yeah.
Kim and I were talking about contracts the other day, and it made me think, I don't know if you all watched the X-Files, but there was an X-Files where they could make wishes. And I remember David Duchovny he made this list of but you had to have all these parameters around the wishes so it wouldn't change the world or cause an apocalypse or something. And sometimes I feel like my contract is starting to look a little bit like that. If this happens though, but if this happens, but I would much rather have it in writing. I just think it's so much better to have it everything that you can think of happen in writing. So, and I love hearing from other folks about what you're putting into your contract, because I think that helps me think about mine, right? What should people be thinking about, which is really great. So
I would say that's the thing I think about for even more than pricing almost every single year, is what else now do I have every year and even quarterly at times, I have found things I'm adding, because it's just okay, well, who would have thought I need to say that, but I do. And you keep going. One of the things we implemented was there's the service agreement contract, but also we wrote out a list of expectations, not only for the student, but also for us as the counselors, and share that even in that initial inquiry call. That's one of the first things we share with them is, this is how this working with us looks like this, and what you can expect from us, what we expect from you, the student, and you, the parents. And that has been helpful because it's a good talking point tool as well. And then once they sign on, they also get a copy of that with their packet of information during the onboarding. So some of that is just it's more explicit, because again, I don't think they all read every detail in the service agreement. So at least we're kind of doing dual purposes with that.
mm-hmm.
And it has been helpful for us.
I really like that idea. I have a junior, an addendum that's in part of my the packet that my students get. That's basically juniors, these are the rules you will follow. Because I take on mostly much younger students. So it's juniors, here's a reminder of this stuff. And then I think having just a reminder contract when they're hitting that senior year I love that idea. I think that's a really good idea. Yeah. This is, you have to turn stuff in. And I think that's one of the other things is just the way my practice runs, but my contract as well puts a lot on the students. I'm I am not going to check. I'm not your mom. And I'm also not a professor in college who's going to check on you. And my goal is for you to get to college and be successful when people are not checking on you. So it is your responsibility to do all of these things. You have to get stuff on a time. You have to, you are the final reader for your essays, because I just am I don't have the bandwidth to, especially with these students who I feel are super vulnerable and super irresponsible and are used to having helicoptering happening all the time. I'm I want you to succeed in college, so I'm going to make you do a lot of this work, because holy molasses. Yeah, it's been other folks, anything new that you've done or anything that you really love about how your practice runs that has been really helpful for you this past year? Please just jump in, feel free. Anything that, and I think maybe we can head to the next question then, which is something you wish you knew how to do better. I feel like everything. I am grateful for these groups because I'm always like, oh man, I could do all these things better. Anything that you would like to do, you wish you knew how to do better, or you wish you had some advice on, particularly from this past year, which was chaos, I feel like.
I have a question for the group that I think falls under this question. And that has to do with price increases and how often do other consultants review and consider price increases? You know, what is that sweet spot of timing that you feel like, you know, the adjustment with whatever you want to say cost of living, or because your expertise become more and more developed and you offer more and more services to your students? Is there an increment of time that most people use for that sort of review and action? That's my question.
I think I've raised my prices every time I've filled up another year, you know, so now I've got space only for rising ninth graders. So probably once a year I readjust, because obviously my prices are, I mean, the community is bearing the price that I'm putting forth right now. So I just keep raising it to sort of take control of my life, so I'm not overrun by clients. But then I do pro bono work too, so that kind of, you know, evens that out a bit.
I will say that was kind of one of the hardest things when we started, because so we're in Greensboro, North Carolina, which is a very different area from Charlotte, Raleigh. And, you know, when we were trying to figure out how to price our services, and as a matter of fact, me and one of my partners just had this conversation this morning, and we had planned to raise our prices before COVID hit. And then COVID hit, and we just didn't feel it was right to, you know, everybody was struggling, and we didn't want to make it harder financially for families. So we were kind of, okay, what do we do? And so we kind of held off. We had taken on some later students, and usually if we take them on later, we would charge them a little bit more, because we were kind of cramming everything in. Like we didn't know the student, we hadn't had that much time, we had to get to know them quicker. But then, like Catherine said, pretty much what we've done now is when we filled up a cohort, when we start bringing in that new cohort, we went ahead and raised it when we started taking sophomores, or students, I guess, that were sophomores this past year. And we're already talking about, you know, to try to get ourselves up to something that's more competitive, because I think probably we all undervalue our services and what we're worth, because, you know, who wants, you know, I guess you kind of are a narcissist if you walk around saying, well, I'm worth this much. But, you know, we do undervalue ourselves. And part of it is also knowing what your community will support. But, you know, I mean, my son, my husband, they're all like, you guys should be charging more, you know, when you think about what you're doing. So.
Well, that's good to hear, because we're at kind of a lot of different places. We're in several different cities, even though so much is virtual. I'm actually in North Carolina, in Asheville, and we're in New Orleans and a lot of all over the place. But New Orleans has a big presence as well. But it's amazing, because when I compare our services to some other IECs, since I've been doing this for almost 30 years, mine are a little bit perhaps more complex, and I have lots of bells and whistles. And if some others are charging about the same, but I'm offering more, you know, but there's that sweet spot of not wanting to you know, I know we're worth it, but I don't want to be a burden for families. I want them to still be able to utilize our services and be accessible, yet especially if I know that we bring more to the table than comparables, if you will. It's hard to know how often to do that, even though I've been doing this for so long.
Graciela, you have your hand raised. What would you like to add?
Yeah, no, I was just going to offer, first of all, hello, everyone. I'm fairly new IEC, so this is my 5th year. And when I came into the process, I did severely undervalue myself, but I didn't have any kind of point of comparison. I didn't know anyone in the industry. So I kind of, what I did is I looked at SAT tutors. And since I work hourly, I thought of myself like an admissions tutor. And that's how I started. But I came to find out that I was actually, undervalued. And so needing to be measured, because you can't just like jump. What I've done is I've set myself a goal that for those first 5 years, annually, I reevaluated my price. I use May 1 as a cutoff so that on May 1, which is the date of decision day, that I close the year, for lack of a better word, and I start with you. And that's when I increase my price. I have increased my price, and roughly between 5 and 10% each year, right? Trying to keep it like that. I'm hourly, so that works. That's easy. And people purchase packages of hours, so that makes it easy. So May 1 is my cutoff. I've kind of been doing it yearly. I'm probably going to reach a point in the next 2 years, I think, where I'll just level off because I feel comfortable, and it seems like that's a good fit for the clients. I have a lot of work, so I think they're also not beating down my door, which means they're not spreading the word around that I'm easy. So I think it's a good balance. But the one thing I did do last year on the advice of a friend who's not in this field, but is also a consultant as well, because she heard me complaining about the kids that come to me like end of August, September, and they're desperate and need us a help. And I'm working with their friend and they just should have come sooner. And she said, you should be doing surge pricing. I had never thought of that. And frankly, I was a little afraid to do it. But then I did. And I kind of came up with like just a mini package of 5 hours in a surge price mode. And nobody batted an eye. It was like, great. So now I put it in my contract. I put that, pricing will be evaluated as of May 1. If you sign up before May 1, you will fall under the price of the previous year. And then after September 1, so between September 1 and December 31, depending on the service that you're needing, and I list them, so it's essay coaching, college list making, 2 others, I forget what they are. There's a surge price involved. And then that's this package. And it worked out great. I felt, I didn't feel like, oh God, I've taken this on for no reason. So that was really good. And it was very clear to parents. And this year I had a few say, what is the cutoff again? Like when they reached out, they were like, so what's the cutoff? And I'm like, yeah, word got out. Like, so that's the way I've kind of done mine.
If it's helpful for people who do package pricing, I was noticing we do like annual, package pricing tiered on when the year the student begins. And I was noticing that, especially when you hit around May, because we start our calendar year with the school, in August. And I was noticing families who find us at May in the previous years, obviously they're not super inclined to pay, let's say if they find us as a finishing sophomore, to pay the sophomore package and pretty much the whole year is over. So we started to and agreed upon shifting our pricing so that if a student is finding us in April, May, we'll offer just for this scenario in this time span, an hourly rate to talk about course selection, summer activities, the specific things, and then we begin our next year package August 1st. And that has actually helped us, I think, retain a couple of clients with this concept in mind, which is interesting. And so just kind of shifting to see what the market needs and kind of understanding where they're coming from to say like what's reasonable also, and kind of adjusting accordingly might help.
I'm just watching all of the heads nodding furiously. Like, it's so great. Yeah, this is really, really great. So helpful. Any other things that people have that you wish you knew how to do better, or things that you have questions about or would like advice for?
For us, for me, it's not so much like what I've been doing, but what changes with FAFSA. Digital SAT coming, it's looking ahead at what things are changing and knowing that how that's like how that's going to impact everything, we're going to be doing gearing up for fall. Like we were just working on all sorts of digital PSAT and SAT information, and, looking at the last dates. SAT just updated, registration dates for the last paper tests. And, so it's, not that I feel like I'm an expert in everything I've been doing, because I'm definitely not, and definitely need to learn things. But for me, it's also kind of looking ahead, because I feel like there's a bunch of big changes coming down the road, and how that's going to just impact everything. What are colleges going to do about their financial aid priority deadlines when we don't even know when FAFSA is going to be available? And parents are, they don't want us to do FAFSA anyway, and they're going to come to us for answers we may not have. So, and of course, there are wonderful people out there like Jeff Levy and, a lot of other people that do a great job, that I just feel like I never knew enough about financial aid to begin with in FAFSA, that it was always a, thing to learn more about, and now it's all changing. So I'm just like, okay, I know what I'm doing this summer.
I just think between the SCOTUS decision and the digital SAT and the vague December FAFSA opening date, we don't even have a date. It's just December. Yeah, this is, it's just, we're just still in like post-COVID world. Like it just a little bit of the Wild West, which is, and I think too, and I don't know how many people have seen this year. I feel like it took a little while for when the DOJ sort of we had to, NACAC had to basically throw out the sort of, here's our ethics rules. It took a little while for it to steamroll, but I feel like it's that giant snowball going down a hill now with colleges really actively doing some crazy stuff with deadlines, housing deadlines, pressuring students to commit early, way before May 1st. Just a lot of, and the number of wait lists that have opened, that is bonkers. Like on May 2nd, the number of wait lists that open. It's just a little bit more of the Wild West too, right? I just feel like there's all of these changes coming, and colleges it's just a free for all a little bit now. It was a little bit of a free for all, and now I think it's just much more a sort of like just the pressure on students to be trying to make those decisions before they've even heard from all of their schools is making my head hurt. It's doing me in a little bit. So
I would say on the other end of that is what's making me nervous about coming up is just guiding our kids through the decision process of where we're going to go, early decision, if we're going to go, are we going to go early action? Because the sure things are no longer the sure things. And I think, I just, you don't want to guide a kid wrong, but you don't want to freak them out. And I think just navigating that for fall. And again, I don't know, I place a lot of kids in the South, but I'm in Oklahoma, and our sure to go to school here is the University of Arkansas. And I cannot tell you how many kids were waitlisted at the University of Arkansas. And it was devastating to kids because they just thought, that's my backup plan. If I can't get where I want to go, that is my backup plan. And now I'm kind of like, yikes, what's the backup plan? So I think that's going into fall. That's my nervous point is what are we doing?
I think for us in North Carolina, Clemson is always just dicey. And I just saw recently some of the Clemson numbers, and it was something like 26% out of state rate. It was insanely low. And so I have all these kids like, oh, Clemson's on my list. And I'm like, Clemson is, it can be on your list, but it is not on your list where you think it is. Like, it's in no way a target for you anymore at all. Like, we are putting it in the category of reach for pretty much everybody right now, unless you have a stellar test score, like it is a reach school for you. So we have that same, and Auburn is the other sort of like, and of course we're in North Carolina. So all these kids are like, I want to go to Auburn or Clemson, or like these, they want the football. And I'm like,
well, and
good luck.
And Clemson's early action this year. What a disaster for your kid. Like there's no safety assurances right now, and it is just mind-boggling of how we're supposed to guide. That's my crazy point.
Kim, I would 1,000% agree. And UTK, do you feel like every kid in North Carolina has discovered that Tennessee exists? Like they're suddenly like, oh, Tennessee is a state next to us and it has a school. Every single kid. And yeah, same thing, like just crazy this year. Yeah.
Football did that. Football.
Yes. Yeah. And it's going to be worse next year because so many of my students have toured. Like they've all toured Tennessee. And they're like, I love it. I'm like, oh,
Love it.
maybe go somewhere else. Let's tour some other places that are better. Yeah, interesting. Should we switch to, oh, go ahead, Kim, I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, and Laura mentioned, thank goodness for Alabama, but I also wonder if the trickle down in that state from Auburn will eventually catch up. I mean, so maybe it's Ole Miss. But,
and then the whole test optional thing. You know, so it's like all these, like Sheena was saying, it's like you're trying to advise them and you've got, is it test optional or not? And even if they are, they probably still need test scores at a lot of these schools anyway. And then it's kind of, wait, the digital SAT is coming, so we have to shift things earlier because they're going to take the digital PSAT in October, but they're not going to have their scores. Yeah. And then you've got deadline. I mean, you know, as juniors go into seniors and then seniors. Yeah. And then just totally unrealistic expectations on students' parts about, I mean, in North Carolina, we saw that huge NC State issue this year, which was mind-boggling. So yeah, it's kind of like, what are your assured admissions? And hopefully Alabama will stay that way a little longer.
Yeah, we'll see. Oh geez. Well, so the next topic then, what is something you've done to build your practice that's worked well? Anybody have advice for the group on that?
Especially, so this is something I know nothing about because I don't do it. Social media stuff. If people use, if you feel like you use, I don't even know what the things are, like Snapchat or TikTok or the Twitter, like whatever. I am like my mom, honestly. I had a meeting with them, or I saw my parents this past weekend and I was like, my mom was fiddling with something and I was like, I have become her. It's terrible. Yeah, Catherine, and then Graciela, please.
I think my practice is built totally on siblings. Like I don't think social media works. I don't think any of that works. It is, I get the first sibling, I get the second, I get the third, then they eventually tell their neighbor. And then it's just total word of mouth. I'm convinced. I'm not doing anything except getting siblings.
Yeah. Word of mouth referrals. Yeah.
Yeah. Graciela, what about you?
Sorry, I had left my hand up.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I don't have a website. I have a Facebook page that I just put interesting things on periodically. But I've never had time to make I'm very blessed. I feel very blessed. It's completely, it's a lot of referrals. And I have a lot of families that have a lot of kids. They're like, oh, there's a 7th grader coming up. And I'm like, how many kids do you have? Like, I've already had 4 of them. Vina, please.
You know, I do social media in the sense that what I've done is I went on to Canva and created 52 posts for Mondays, 52 posts for Wednesdays, and I've already automated it so everything just keeps posting on its own. And I thought it was a waste of time until some family came to me that said, oh, we saw somehow they managed to get onto my Facebook business page and found their way to me. But a lot of the thing, as you said, word of mouth, I've done in order to, like, you know, when I first started, my first year was just pro bono kids. And so that allowed me to at least build my skill sets and to then have a list of like schools, because most families want to know, well, where did the kids get into? Even though I automatically tell them their success doesn't mean yours and vice versa, right? And so that allowed me to sort of like build my expertise over the course of the years. But and word of mouth, and I also network with colleagues. So colleagues who are full end up referring other clients to me. And at some point I know that I'm really good only because it's funny because some of the colleagues are like, you can take care of my daughter because I don't want to deal with her. And so obviously they have some trust in me. Not that I'm really good, but the idea is at least they have some trust in me to be able to say, okay, take care of my child. But it is a slow process. I think when I'd first gotten into the business, I'd seen a post where somebody said within 9 months, she was completely full. And I was like, oh, okay, that's awesome. And then it realized, no, it takes a little bit of time to kind of get there. So, and I'm both my kids have graduated high school. Actually, both have now graduated, first round of university as well. So, that natural flow into the system is not there. So it takes a little bit of time.
I
So
started.
I would,
Go ahead. Sorry, Shannon.
I would agree with whoever said that, your business is not coming from social media. I do believe that, but I think it's important to be visible on there. And so again, I'm like Veena, I have my Canva, but what I do is every Tuesday I send a newsletter to my email list, and then I cross post that on all social media on Tuesdays, and that's all I do. So I'm consistently there once a week. And again, I think it legitimizes, if somebody has heard about you and then they need to see you, your website, your social media, they all reinforce that. I will say that my husband has just had a down month. I don't know what's been going on in his life, but on LinkedIn this month, he has shared my post, my Tuesday post 3 times. And I have had about 8 people call me from my husband reposting it. So he has a different market than I have, obviously, because these people are like, oh, I saw your post on your husband's website, on your husband's LinkedIn. So I think, that's been a little boost. So that's my 2 cents worth.
I post on my Facebook page pretty much every day, actually, because mostly it's just cool stuff that I'm like, oh, people should know about this. And the 2 people who like my posts every day are my mother and my husband. And it's very delightful. And they both read them. Like, I post it and then immediately they both like it. And it's super cute. And so I'm half the time I'm like, why am I even like, what am I even doing? Like, it's literally, I could just tell my mom, like, hey, mom, go read this article. But the number of times I've had people reach out to me and say, I've followed your Facebook page for years and I love what you put on there. And I especially, so right now I do a whole celebration of my seniors and I put their pictures and like their advice for juniors. And I love what you put on there. I'm like, could you have clicked like just once? So there are all these other people out there and people will sometimes comment and I'm like, who are you? Like, I've never even heard of you. Like, where did you come from? So I would totally agree with that I do think having some kind of presence somewhere is really important, and people pay attention more than you think, which is also, I think, a reminder that people pay attention more than you think too, but I would say too, we have a colleague in our area who, Belinda Wilkerson, if you all don't know her, Belinda, yeah, everyone's nodding. Her LinkedIn is a thing of beauty. I mean, she posts constantly and it's extraordinary what she puts on there. If you don't follow Belinda, I would make sure you do because it's really great. And she uses LinkedIn in a really powerful way, I think, which is an interesting, different kind of platform for people to be on. So. Other things that people have done to grow their business in any other ways, or something that you wish you knew how to do in terms of growing your business, something that you're, or managing the growth of your business maybe would be another thing.
I would just recommend as an option, if any of y'all know College Match Point based in Austin, who are wonderful, they do incredible newsletter roundups, like really thoughtful, well-designed, great content, and they're super nice. And they have, obviously they like excel in writing. If you know their team, they have a great team of writers. But it's good food for thought and motivation and inspiration, because we don't really do newsletters, but I'm considering it. And talking to Bob Carlton, who's one of the leads of the team, he's like, they get such great feedback and leads from their newsletters more than anything. He says, drop social media. That's, everybody's experience is going to be different, but they're so effective at their newsletters, and that's for them. And if you see them, you can sign up and you know why, because they're incredible.
Yeah.
So it's one avenue to explore. If maybe, digital media, we don't get a lot of leads from Instagram. We have it for brand awareness sake, that kind of thing. But there's some others that might provide better leads, like newsletters.
And I would also just say,
Go ahead.
oh,
Sorry.
go ahead.
It's okay. Go on.
I was just going to say, also be generous with colleagues. I think that idea is really important, to share referrals and make sure you're doing that really quickly. I think is important. If someone reaches out to you and you don't have space, but if you get back to them really quickly and say, here's a list of people in our area who are wonderful, please reach out to them. It just adds to the professionalism of our sort of how people perceive us, and sort of the generosity of spirit that we have, I think. And I think we can help build, especially newcomers practices by, giving out those referrals, I think is really, really important, and not delaying, I think is the other important piece. Yeah.
Susan, you have.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm new to the business. I started in June, and I live in Athens, Georgia. And I went to and introduced myself to all the college counselors in the local area. Had a meeting with them just to kind of for transparency, and just let them know what I was doing. And I knew a lot of them having done, dual enrollment presentations when I worked at Georgia. But Christy Conley is one of ours, who obviously is the new president of SACAC, and she lives locally. And I found that, I get references from her and her team. And when they find I don't think it hurts. A lot of these counselors are really overloaded. And if they find a parent or student who could really use an IEC and find that time is valuable, no matter, actually one of her referrals was for well, one is in the 9th grade, and then they has a 7th grade son. And so, it's just nice to know that there's a professional partnership there, but also can be valuable in referrals should they need the assistance or where to find things. So it's worked.
That's a great idea too. If you can connect with the local high school counselors.
Right. And granted, Athens is small, and it's, and I kind of use the whole, hey, Dave and Melinda. I mean, I had that Georgia in, and so it made it a little bit easier, I think, but if you have that relationship, or they allow it. I mean, Christy had her whole team. I met with the assistant principal and the whole team, where at Oconee, just down the road, I met one person, and so it varies, right? But yeah, if you can get in, and if it's worth an email and just a little time, just an introduction, then, I mean, granted, a lot of y'all live in big cities, but it's something to think about.
Great idea.
And I think also builds our reputation as folks who are collaborative and want to be inclusive of school counselors and are not stepping on toes. And I mean, I think that's, Kim, you and I talked about this a lot at the SACAC conference, and then just recently, which is really helping to demystify what we do and the role that we play in admissions. I think the post varsity blues reputation is still strong. And so the more that we can cross those bridges and really reach across the table, I think is really important for folks to know, like, oh, what you do, you actually, I think that IECs, we actually talk about ethics of college admissions more than maybe other people. We are constantly worried about the ethics of this process, right? And what we do. And I mean, I think ethical practice is a huge piece of what we do. And I don't know that people necessarily understand that. So how we present ourselves to others outside the field can be really important in building our just the sense of who we are and what we do, I think is really important as well.
Absolutely.
All right, well, let's talk. We have about 15 minutes left. I think it would be a great time to shift to thinking about it's the end of the school year. Everyone's done. It's crazy right now. How are you taking care of yourself? Do you have something that you do that you think is a great idea for others? Is it a goal of yours maybe? Are there things that you would like to know more about taking care of yourself? We are sponges for our students and our families' anxiety. I think we sometimes don't necessarily realize how much we are absorbing a lot of because we are always in that role of like, it's going to be okay. You're going to find your fit. It's okay. You're fine. Everything's fine. But we're still absorbing just waves sometimes of others' anxiety. And so I think self-care is massively important and maybe something that we don't talk about quite enough. So what are people doing to take care of themselves, or what are some things that you would like to know more about in terms of self-care?
I've started blocking an hour and a half at lunch, which is crazy to say. I never did that before. So I'd have people taking that time. I know it sounds bonkers when I say it out loud now, but I actually block an hour and a half for lunch. I spend 30 minutes eating and I go on a walk. And that's really great for self-care to know that nobody can disrupt that time anymore. And I don't know if everybody else, is similar, where they just kind of let their whole schedules be owned by other people. But at this juncture, I think it's really helpful to just like block time for yourself. Simple thing, but
That's very smart.
I think that seems like a simple thing, but it took me a really long time to figure that out. Like it seems like, well, of course you do that, but it took me probably until last year, maybe the year before I was like, wait, actually I can control my calendar. Like, oh, hey, I could just actually make appointments and set things. And yeah, it seems simple, but it's real. And I think being intentional and prioritizing is super important. Yeah, really, really important.
Does anyone close for an extended period of time in the summer? Like just stop? Yeah. I'm thinking about, that's what I want to do. No, nothing in July. Just.
So I can speak to that. Last year and this year, I did that because the first 3 years I was just 365 days. And also the nature of my practice, I work with a lot of athletes who are not home until 6, 7 o'clock at night. So I work every night until, in the heat of the cycle, till midnight, sometimes even 12:30. But these kids are not home until 7:30, and they got to eat, and then they start doing their work. So 2 things that I did is, one, a couple of years ago, I shifted to saying I work nights, which made it psychologically easy. And then I realized I don't start work until noon or 1 o'clock or 2, right? So then I shifted my, not happy hour time, but like you're off work at 5. Well, I'm off work in the morning and I don't start until 1 o'clock. So that my morning became my night. That was huge when I realized that there's a given time period where I work nights. That was big. And then last year and this year, and it worked. I got everybody up to a point. June, it changes a little bit, but by June, first or second week of June, everybody's doing their shadowings, their programs, or whatever. They've written essays or they're editing, and then I do a month off. June, either June 15th. This year it'll be June 13th to July 15th. Now, I'm available in the sense that, obviously we're always available. So if there's a crisis, but I take off that month. And then I also took off December 2 weeks, like the 2 weeks off completely. So that was what I did. But the working nights mentally for me was huge, like to say that I work nights in that sense.
Our daughter got married in January, and I decided for the wedding that I wanted Michelle Obama arms, which I do not have, but I was like working towards them. I was like, I want those. And so I started just going to the gym, which I used to love going to the gym like a lot. And then just life happens. And so now I'm very intentional, and I turn off everything except my music when I'm at the gym. So usually about an hour and a half, 2 hours a day. I will not answer anything that anybody and my husband's always like, I can't get a hold of you. And I'm like, you know where I am, because I stopped by your store on the way to the gym. You know where I am. If you have to go, you can call the gym. But again, it seems like such a small thing, but just completely turning off for that space of time and really not checking my email or looking at anything, or no one can get to me. Has been, and I'm probably going to go deaf because I listen to music really loudly as I'm lifting, which is great. But that has made a huge difference for me. Just a very daily intentional turning off and doing something that's only for me. Like, this doesn't help anybody else in the world. It just helps me. So
that's great.
And also I go to the gym when it's like me and 3 old men, and it's so great because there's nobody else there. So I can act like a fool. And it's like, I sing to my house. Yeah, it's great. So
we actually, along those lines with vacation times and things like that, also with that list of expectations that we put together, and we will do this annually, a list of when we're like, we tell them at the beginning, we are closed for this week at Thanksgiving, this week at Christmas, or the holidays in general. And then if we know well enough in advance, like we haven't done just a month at a time. So we've put in what our vacation times are for the summer. But if we move toward that idea of we are closed in July, that will go in there as well. And so I feel like if you tell them, it's like my doctor's office. He's never there on Fridays. I cannot go on a Friday as much as I would like to, but I know that. And I think if we just put that in place, they have to work around. My husband's always said that to me. People work around it. You set it up. And I've been like, no, I'm always available. It's all good. But not anymore. Not anymore.
You're like, heck with that, man.
I've done that a long time ago.
I also have in my contract when the last dates that I'll read things and review applications.
That's important too.
And yeah, that's also in my contract, which is December 10th for like, I will not look at your application after that. Like, if you want to apply to other schools, if you add schools, like, good luck to you. It's great. And so I'm pretty much done with everybody. I mean, most of my students, honestly, I'm done by Halloween because they're almost all early action everywhere. That's just like clients that I have. But I'm pretty much done with everybody else Thanksgiving. Like I just am like, I can't deal with you. Like you've had months to do this. So, and students know that. They're like, I decided to apply to Princeton on my own. I'm like, great, it's good times. Good luck to you. You did it in January, like 2 days before the application. Good luck. Yeah.
Mhm. Vina, did you have something else?
Yeah, I think I was going to add, one of the things that I do with the seniors is as soon as they step back into school and have their proper schedule of events, they each get to pick like a day on the calendar with 1 hour allotted to them. So they know that every week that they have a set appointment time that they're going to meet with me. And then that way they know they need to produce. Because I tried to give them weekend appointments and stuff. If it was Saturday, they were coming unprepared because they were so exhausted. Friday was a waste. And then if it's Sunday, they're trying to get ready for the coming week. And so they're also not productive. So I said the weekday is the best time. That way they can use their weekends any which way they want and get prepared to be able to meet with me. And so at least the weekends are downtime for me. And I only offer an appointment if it's an absolute emergency and the kid couldn't meet with me during the weekdays.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'd like to, wait a minute, goals.
Seriously. Yeah.
No, I'm bi-coastal. So most of my kids are California or they're on the East Coast. So I can stagger them during the week and be able to do it. And by Friday afternoon, I shut the calendar off at 5 o'clock. So nobody can actually book with me on Friday evening either. And so it's just Monday through Thursday. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love it.
Go ahead, Patty.
Like me, I'm at a different stage in the business. I'm fully retired and doing this part-time and loving it. So I don't want a large group of clients, but I'm blessed that my son, who's grown, loves to travel the world with me. So a month, 6 weeks, 2 months in advance, we figure out where we're going to go. And we make plans. And I always tell my families right away, these dates are locked out. I will not be available. And it has turned into some very interesting conversations with the families about family values and how even when you're grown, you can stay close with mom and dad. And so it's been a very interesting dynamic. And I think the families respect it completely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's wonderful.
I just went to, my son and I do a trip every year, and he and I just went to Formula One in Miami, which was amazing. And so kind of my outgoing message. And so the number of people who were like, that is the coolest thing that you and your son go do things together. And for me, I guess in my head, I was like, well, of course we do. Like, we've always done a trip. That's just like, we've always done a trip together. But I think you're exactly right. It's a really interesting sort of way to model behavior, right? And values and who you are and what matters to you. And I would completely agree, Patty. I think the response that I've gotten to just that one little trip that we just did was fascinating, really fascinating to me.
I think that that goes hand in hand with what I say to my kids. I want you to explore. When you go to somewhere new, I want you to Google what are the top 10 things to do there and do one of them. And so whenever I am traveling with my kids, I mean, I had the blessing of this past year, 2 of my kids were studying abroad, and that was my Tuesday newsletter. This is the top 10 things I did in Paris. These are the top 10 things I did in Ireland. And I always start it with, I'm following my own advice. I think reinforcing that with kids, that we are lifelong learners, that we are lifelong explorers. I think that just it models that really well for them. So I'm fully on board with all of those ideas.
Yeah, that's great. Kim, final thoughts? What are you doing? Okay, first of all, Kim is like moving and she's graduation. What are you doing for self-care? I'm very worried about you. Is my other question.
I'm going to the gym. I'm still going
Okay,
to the gym every morning. I did that and running because I'm taking advantage of New York not having humidity for the next month until I'm back in the South. So yeah, thank you. I'm taking care of myself as much as I can in between packing boxes and celebrating graduation and athletic events as well. So thank you. But my parting shot is just, I'm going to miss this gathering until we reconnect again in the fall. I think this is so valuable. And, even when I think, okay, I've got it all figured out, I learned something every time we have a conversation. So I'm just so appreciative of everybody's willingness to share and talk about it and talk about what we're doing and things like that. And so have a great summer, everyone.
absolutely. And I think we'll be back hopefully, I think September, October,
it's
a
September.
virtual
Okay.
session again. Yeah, we'll try to do at least 2 next year again. And if anyone ever has questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to either Kim or myself. We would love to hear from you. And we hope you have
I
a
hope
wonderful
we
summer.
connect before NACAC. If not, if anybody happens to be going to NACAC, let's make sure we can find each other.
Yeah, and if anybody's going to be at the HECA conference, I will be there. If anybody's going to be at HECA coming up, so yay, good. Come say hello. I'll hopefully find you. Wonderful. I hope everyone has a wonderful summer. Safe travels if you're going someplace. And good luck to your next cohort of students as they're working on them with them as they're coming up now. And have everyone have a really wonderful week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Take care.